Live from the Channel 7 studios, this is AM San Francisco. Now, here are your hosts, Terry Lowry and Fred Lacoste.
Good morning. Later on in the program, we're going to be talking about establishing a credit rating and how to avoid being left out in the cold credit-wise if you're a woman who's widowed or divorced. Some really interesting things to talk about.
I want you to picture yourself, by the way, the mother or the father of, say, about a 16 to 17-year-old daughter. And all of a sudden, she came home one day, and she looked like this. Actually, very lovely. But it's not exactly what you normally see at the shopping center in suburbia, is it?
I don't know. It depends.
Tell me what happened when your mother and or father first saw you looking like this.
He didn't notice. He purposely avoided noticing. I came back with green hair, and he avoided it. He didn't mention anything about it.
Nothing at all? And he's never said anything at all?
Well, he has. You know, he avoided it for like the first few hours, and it was like, Angela, teenagers, blah, blah, blah.
But you're still doing it. How long has it been now?
I've been doing it since, my freshman year, 5 years.
Okay, so it's been a while.
Yes.
Yeah. So you're still involved in what we call the punk culture of today, huh?
Yes.
We're going to find out why in a little bit from you and a lot of other folks. And I want you to meet two people right now that we're going to talk to first. We have Jack Levin, sociologist, with us, and also Jello Biafra, the leader of the Dead Kennedys rock group. Please welcome them. I want you to AM San Francisco. Hi, guys. How you doing?
Hi, how are you?
You know, a lot of people, Jello, in this so-called middle class that Jack and I are in, we see people dressed a little differently than us, and we think, oh, this is punk. What is punk, according to you?
I think if you asked 30 people that, you'd get 30 different explanations. Partly because the look has been lifted now through MTV, and half the secretaries on Market Street look like the lady you just interviewed.
Yes, so in other words, it can be a fashion statement. That's one way to look at it, huh?
Well, anything in a consumer culture that pops up out of the underground is going to turn into a fashion statement sooner or later.
Eventually, yeah.
That's true.
How about you, though? What does punk mean to you?
I think it's a state of mind very similar to the spirit of rebellion of the Beats or the hippies back when it was dangerous to be a hippie and it meant some kind of activist stance instead of just growing out your hair and drinking beer and listening to heavy metal.
Let's take a look now. There's something on here. This must be symbolic of what you're against or for or what?
It's more lampooning what we're against in a way, with the tide of, shall we say, Christian versions of Ayatollah Khomeini with $100 million apiece wanting to turn this country into a Christian version of Iran. We might as well expose them for what they are, you know, taking spiritual values, using them as a carrot on a stick to lure people into their little mind control trip.
Yeah, so what you're really opposed to, then I get here, is
religion
materialism.
for profit.
Religion for profit would be one of them. How about materialism, too? Are you totally opposed to materialism?
Well, not totally. I have this habit of collecting records. Is that materialistic?
I don't know. If you get kicks out of the records, why not, huh? I guess. Jack, should we, in the middle class of America, be afraid of Jello Biafra and the punk generation of today?
Well, if we better start being afraid fast, because this thing has been around since 1920. Yeah. Every generation has had its youth counterculture. You can go back to the flappers of the 20s. Those were the first teenagers. You know, before the 20s, there were no such thing as teenagers at all. I mean, you just went right from childhood into adulthood.
You worked right away, didn't you?
Exactly. There was a rite of passage. In other countries, for example, you might go into the jungle for 2 days, kill 6 lions, come out and you're an adult. Here we have this long, extended period of adolescence. Teenagers can remain that way until they're 30 years old. I mean, you know, it's funny when I say there were no teenagers. Of course, there were people who were 13 or 14 years old, but there wasn't this shared lifestyle together. And we started that when with compulsory education. We started that with child labor laws, the automobile, which insisted that our young people become independent of their parents. And then all of a sudden you got people in the 20s wearing short skirts and they were powdering their knees or putting rouge on their knees. I mean,
Yeah.
and it was freaking out their parents. That's where it began.
But a lot of the grandmothers of today and grandfathers of today were those flappers, and they're saying, wait a minute, that was different.
Oh,
it's a little bit different because now
Sure.
there's violence associated with the punk generation.
Wait.
Isn't there, Jello, or not?
There was violence associated with that, too.
Sure.
Remember the Fatty Arbuckle case or
Yeah.
something?
Oh, indeed, yes, when he supposedly committed a murder here in San Francisco, or allegedly did. But let's talk about some of the violence that is associated with the punks, though. In other words, there's animal torture, animal killing that we keep hearing about. Is that universal in the punk culture?
I don't think it's even in the punk culture at all. The only animals that many of us believe deserve a taste of their own medicine would be police officers. But I think what you're confusing punk with would be heavy metal. And yes, heavy metal is loud music, but it's probably the most conservative form of loud music there is today. It pushes a very rigid look, a very rigid lack of value systems and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And the animal torture came from Alice Cooper in the 70s and Ozzy Osbourne, a heavy metal star in the 80s, and maybe they got their inspiration for all those staged incidents in Wild Kingdom or something.
Well, maybe we shouldn't associate it with the rock movement, however, a punk movement. However, there is
the
violence.
the punk movement is very active, especially in England and in this country, against animal torture in science labs and things.
But you are
Exactly the
associated
opposite.
with violence. For example, a lot of people look at your, what do you call it, slam dancing? And they say, my word, that there's nothing except violence associated with that.
If you're in the middle of it, it's usually far less dangerous than football.
I've heard it referred to as football indoors.
Well, the
right.
difference is there isn't this attitude that you have to cheat and win one for coach.
Okay. What we're looking at right now, we're looking at for a moment there, were a lot of different hairdos. And in fact, back in the dressing room, you made sure that your hairdo was just right when you came out here, see? Yeah. In other words, it's sort of anti-establishment. Now, why do you have to make a statement out in front of God and everybody? Why is it important to make this kind of a statement?
Well, for the same reason you put all this work into becoming a talk show host, so you could be on the air, you know, to say, we're somebody too.
So in other words, you feel like you have to wear a uniform that resembles all the other?
No, not at all. I mean, I dress pretty much however I want to, when I want to. I've even performed in a double knit suit with a kind of tie he has concealed under his sweater before, just for a change of pace, a sense of surprise to keep things
Are you making
fresh.
fun of my tie?
He's making fun of his tie. Yeah,
Well,
he
you
is.
begged me to in the dressing room, then
got
you
a
put
point
it under
there,
your
doesn't he?
sweater.
Now,
See
Jack-
my Mickey Mouse tie.
Jack
give it
doesn't
away.
look like a rebel, does he? But underneath this sweater, you've got to see, as long as we've referred to
Well,
it now, right?
do I have to pull it
You've
in?
got to do it, yeah. Come on, let's take a nice close-up. Can we see this, baby?
Mickey Mouse.
I don't know if you can see that. Now, this is an incredible rebellion, Jack. I'm amazed that you're going to do this on television. What are people going to think of you?
M-I-C-K-E-Y.
Well, on the other hand, isn't a necktie the equivalent for men that high heels are for women as kind of
That's
a
right.
token gesture of slavery to the workforce? A
Well,
little hangman's noose to walk around and, you know, here's my little leash, I got my tie on, can I work now?
this is a man with a different point of view, wouldn't you say?
What do you really hope to accomplish, Jello? What do you and other punks, in other words, you're trying to make a statement, aren't you, against the establishment. What can you possibly hope to accomplish looking like this, rather than working within the system and trying to affect some positive change? Eh?
Well, I think one positive change is to try and find an alternative to the system itself. And obviously we can't just flip-flop the whole country and do that. You can't have any kind of cultural revolution as quickly as changing channels on a television set. Mm-hmm. So I guess it involves, say, action by example to prove that we don't necessarily have to adopt the same value system of like a house, a garage, a bunch of kids that hate you when they grow up and things like that, and measure success and by wealth. What we want to do is try to help torpedo the me generation by working to avoid becoming a part of it. And also, on a positive note, trying to say, do some preventive medicine this time and avoid our friends and brothers getting drafted and killed in Nicaragua to make arms dealers rich, you know. The
So what
boys
you're
getting
saying is
caught with our pants down the way people were when their friends came home in designer body bags from Vietnam.
So what you're saying is if we take a look at you first, look beyond that. Look at what you're saying and what you're really rebelling to, and maybe we can learn something about ourselves and our own values. Huh?
Well, kind of hope so.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Californians have made this book their hands-down favorite, The Pacific Bell Yellow Pages, second to none. Because whether it's a telescope you want, or a grill for a vintage car, or tuba lessons, or a driveway, or extra-wide shoes, there is no surer place in all the state to find them. Certainly there are other directories. It's just hard to imagine why. The Pacific Bell Yellow Pages, simply the best.
This is the sight and sound of a healthy heart. To have it, you should exercise and follow a proper diet. That's why you should use Safola. Safola is pure safflower oil. In independent tests, Safola proved lower in saturated fats than the leading cooking oils, even Mazola and Puritan. And Safola has absolutely no cholesterol.
Chicken tastes great.
Thanks, honey. And thank you, Safola.
So listen to your heart. Safola.
The Embarcadero YMCA now has openings in their downtown licensed child care center for young children. Call 621-YMCA.
I need your help. My big sister, Mama Celeste, she make a great crust for her pizza. But was it Giuseppe's idea? I say, Mom, you make a perfect sauce, a perfect toppings, make a perfect crust. She do it, but I think it. So my picture should be on the box, too. You like happy, like, hey, I think of a great crust. Or serious, like, yes, I think of a great crust. Or bigger.
Celeste Pizza. Delicious crust makes it great from top to bottom.
You want the look that gets the looks. You got the look. Jordache jeans. Dare to be noticed.
Our lawyers are in courtrooms like this every day, representing people, not corporations. At Hyatt Legal Services, we concentrate on personal cases like divorce, probate, accidents, and bankruptcy. So we handle a lot of them. For just $20, you can consult with one of our attorneys and feel confident we have the experience to back it up. I'm Joel Hyatt, and you have my word on it. We took the fear out of legal fees across the country and in your neighborhood.
That's the slam dancing we were just referring to a little while ago, and as you say, probably safer than a football field in some cases.
Well, I read that as many as 15 people a year are paralyzed for life playing high school level football, and how many people that age are paralyzed for life slam dancing?
Well, we don't know that, do we? But anyway, that's an interesting analogy. Jack, let's go to you. I know you spent a lot of time studying this punk generation. I'd like to find out what the difference is between our era, the beat era, and then the hippie era, and the punks. Are they all the same, well, just young people rebelling, or what?
You know, there really isn't that much difference. I kind of consider the baby boom generation as the new old fogies. I mean, they look with nostalgia at the good old days of the 60s, for example, and those peaceful hippies. I mean, their LSD trips, the rebellious behavior, the riots at the convention in 1968. That, for some reason, is not violent, but the punks are violent. All the beautiful aesthetics of the 60s, that long hair with the, you know what I'm talking about, out to here? I mean, let's face it, it was so outrageous. The whole hippie generation was so outrageous that punks have to go one more step into the absurd in order to freak out the last generation. You know, I mean, what do we want them to do, have long hair? That's old-fashioned. So they have to, instead, they dye it red or purple or shave half of it off. What else are they going to do? There's nothing left, except maybe to stick a safety pin through their cheek.
And
That's about
hasn't
it.
been done in 8 years.
It hasn't been done in 8 years.
ought
In
to
other
try
words,
it.
there's no self-mutilation anymore?
Well, there might be of different forms, but since people were trying to keep it fresh, the safety pin was gone by the time I moved here in 1978 or so.
We've got, of course, the hippies of the 60s are now the adult generation. They now have homes and kids and families, the whole works. Is that what's going to happen to the punk generation, do you think? Another 10 or 15
Oh, I
years?
think that you can already see what's happening, that a lot of new wave politics, new wave art, new wave music, dancing, came from the punks, and it's become socially acceptable. Now, Jello may not like that, but that's exactly the same thing that happened to the hippies. It became the hip generation, and those bell-bottom jeans became designer jeans after a while.
But how much of that was simply lifted by the architects of consumer culture and then sold back to the originators at twice the price?
Well, whatever, but it also started in the same place with a youth counterculture, and then it became assimilated into middle-class society. The same thing is happening now with punk. Exactly the same thing.
I actually do agree with that.
I have a young man standing right here who's probably shaking in his boots because I just came to him. He had no idea that I was going to come to him. How old are you?
I'm 16.
Yeah. What's your name?
David Barrett,
Where are you from?
Huntsville, Alabama.
Yeah, Huntsville, Alabama. Did you have punks in Huntsville?
Not much.
Now, what do you think? What do you think of this outfit over here? Huh?
Well, I don't know. It's all right, I guess.
I mean, do you rebel also? Do you have some questions about the establishment and some of our materialistic society?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Would you ever dress up in something like this?
Probably not.
Yeah. Why not though?
Well, my parents would probably kill me.
Now that's an interesting point. Yeah, Jello, how about your parents? When did you start dressing like this, and how did they react?
They were a little bit ruffled, but they didn't really mind because I had real long hair before that, which they got used to. And I was one of the first people in my school to grow my hair, and then the first to cut it back off again with dull scissors. The second time I did it, my mom just went, "Oh!" And that day I started a job, too.
Yes.
I was just interested in the comment about the generations that you stereotyped, and I'm in between. I miss the beatniks, and I was too old to be a flower child.
Okay.
And what are we going to do for our teenage years that we missed?
Well, it's too late. I guess it's too late now, isn't
Or
it?
are
huh?
we the ones that are
Stop
the dropping out
worrying
now?
about
No,
it,
no, I'm not
number
worried.
one.
But I'm just curious. You know, it's interesting you've labeled us in 20-year segments, and some of us fell in the cracks. And I'm just kind of curious. Do we emerge in our 70s and 80s?
Oh, there were ways in the cracks too. I mean, for example, there was Elvis Presley. Look at the reaction to Beatles' haircut in 1963. I mean, people were irate. They couldn't accept that. That was the worst thing that ever happened. Look what happened to the miniskirt. They were kicking people out of schools in the early 60s for wearing miniskirts or long hair. So every generation can find some other people to rebel. It's been here since 1920. And you know, the punks are a lot like the Beats. They say their attitude very often is, you leave us alone, we'll leave you alone. We don't want to change you. You're beyond redemption. That's what they think of us. I mean, I'm generalizing. Some of them don't. But the Beats kind of felt the same way in the 50s. Same thing.
Yeah. You know, I rebelled when I was a teenager, and I was opposed to a lot of things in our society. This young man's the same way. But I was more concerned about what I could do and what I was in favor of and what I was for. It seems like, to me, that punks are primarily opposed to something. Now, what do you stand for? And what do you really hope to accomplish, you see? That's what a lot of people are asking.
Well, in a nutshell, people who are willing to think for themselves instead of letting people on television do it for them. And say the old utopian goal of a world without things like needless war to make arms dealers rich, a world where people can treat each other decently so they don't need cops and laws to do it for them.
More right after this. Don't go away.
Sausages.
Dogs in search of the ideal snack.
Sausages.
What is that special treat?
Sausages.
We know they love to snitch a snack. We know they love to sneak a sausage, so...
Sausages.
That's it. Sausage-style snacks.
Sausages.
Made with meat, a hearty taste, a healthy chew, and voila, the ideal snack.
Sausages.
But what will we call them?
Sausages.
Doggy snacks?
Sausages.
Little saucies?
Sausages.
Sausages? Kennel ration snotsages? Scrumptious sausage-style snacks for dogs.
Just a little slice of America, Wonder Bread. Just a part of life in America, Wonder Bread. All across the USA, 15 million times a day.
15 million times a day, America loves the taste of wonder.
Just a little slice of America, Wonder Bread.
If you're an East Bay resident and you believe that you have been discriminated against, call Echo Housing at 581-9380.
Mom, here come the Popples for your child. Popples are pals that pop out of pockets. Popples are pals that pop out of pockets. A soft fuzzy ball that turns into a friend. The fun keeps building and the laughing never ends. Popples are pals that pop out of pockets. They're funny, they're new, because they turn inside out. And that's what Popples are all about. Your child will love them.
Hurry, the king waiteth. Take it away.
It doesn't taste good enough.
Not thick enough.
It's going to take the best tasting light mayonnaise to please His Majesty.
Good enough.
Thick enough?
It must be the best.
New Best Foods Light Reduced Calorie Mayonnaise. Half the calories. The best tasting light in the land.
The street. It's the wrong place for a kid to learn about life.
I know. I'm Telly Savalas, and I was there once myself.
I found a way to beat the streets. It's your local boys club, a place where people care. And they could use a hand right now. Yours, baby.
Support your local boys club.
Take a walk on the wild side by joining the AM audience. Call 954-7-TIX now for tickets.
Got a question here.
I wanted to ask Jack a question. Is there like a way that we can get our parents to understand what we're doing? Because my parents pretty much hate everything that I do. My hair, my clothes, the way I act towards them, and school and everything.
Well, you know, it's a tough question, and there isn't one answer. Actually, we ask for it, don't we? I mean, we expect our teenagers to become independent of us. That's not a universal. That's something about our society. We ask them to move out and establish their own household, and that's when they become adults. Well, so this is one way that people become independent. Maybe if parents could understand that, that's one thing. Two, maybe they should understand that punk is not just a counterculture, it's also a style. And it's a fashion. And for some people, it's nothing more or less than that. It doesn't necessarily mean that there's personality disorganization, that the kid is falling apart. I think parents have to look at the whole thing, not just at style and fashion. They have to ask, are there drugs involved? What else is happening in life? Is there depression? Is the kid going into his or her room and locking the door and that's it? Maybe a very harmless thing. Yes.
Hi. I'm just interested in knowing about how do you handle the work situation? Where do you work, and what's the reaction at your job, and how do you handle that?
How do you make money? How do you survive? Huh? Sure. Anybody want to handle that? Yeah. You have a job?
Yeah, I have a job. I'm a waitress.
Okay. And the boss doesn't mind? Hmm?
Well, I can fix myself anyway, so I wear a hat. No problem.
See, she disguises herself. That's one way to do it, yeah. But I bet there are a lot of objections on the labor market. Do you have a job yourself? No. You trying to get one?
Well, she and I have a paper out because we don't have to look a certain way to deliver papers.
So you are limited then. If you're willing to look this way, then you are limited to what you can do in our society, aren't you?
But there are other things we can do. Work at record stores, make indie music.
I worked at a clothes store once. It was kind of a rock and roll shop, and I worked there for a while, and they didn't mind at all what I did.
But there are some limitations, obviously, in our society, aren't there? That's
But it's not really something we want to do anyways. I don't want to work in an office.
I don't need a job.
Okay, you don't have to do with motives
Fred,
then.
there are
Sure,
also,
yes.
you know, I just want to point out there are also weekend punkers who look very straight during the week and then they spray their hair on the weekend and have a good time. There were also weekend hippies in the 60s,
Sure.
same thing.
You bet.
I'm a recruiter,
Mhm.
and I'd have a real problem sending these young ladies out for an interview.
Yeah. I imagine you would, but you heard, but you heard him say they don't care because they don't want the kind of jobs that you probably are recruiting for. Right?
Probably correct.
That makes a big difference.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. Yes, sir. Please stand up.
Right, I got a question for the young man there. And yesterday I was pumping gas at the gas station, and in front of me was this man. He had a normal haircut, but he had this long pigtail behind him. What's the significance about that?
Is there any significance in that, or just his own style, or what, Jello? What do you think?
Maybe somebody who hangs out at discos and wants to be all things to all people.
Of course, I remember when the first DAs came out with the flat tops, too, back in the late 40s. Huh? Some of us looked kind of silly then.
Hi. I'd like to say that although I agree with some of the things you say, maybe not with others, you should be commended for taking the risk and being strong enough to say what you believe in and be an individual and not just cloned and think what everybody else thinks. And I think no matter what it is you believe in, that you should be commended for that.
He's got the courage to speak up, doesn't he? And at least to say exactly what he wants to. Yes, did you have one here? Yeah, you bet.
I hear Jello saying that the punk generation is making a statement, and I can appreciate that. I'm just curious, from Jack's point of view, sociologically, do these kind of rebellions affect the change, really?
Yes, I really think so. Look what happened in the 60s with the hippies. They changed our whole generation. And the same thing is true here. You can see, for example, in the new politics, the rock against racism, for example, we can talk about Live Aid, Farm Aid. Young people are becoming more political again. A lot of that started with the punks.
Who were the front line at the Democratic Convention, for that matter? You asked earlier about cynicism. Why are the punks so much more cynical? I don't think they're cynical towards the world so much as watching the people from the 60s and the hippies mutate into the me generation, the yuppies.
You're going to run for mayor again, by the way?
I might not. School board might be interesting, too.
Mayor Jello Biafra. Doesn't have a ring